They came to Lord Talia when his daughter was still pink and screaming in her cradle. The astrologers, the wise men, the ones who read doom in the stars. They spoke of flax, you see. A splinter no bigger than a whisper hidden in thread that would end his little girl. Not dead, they said, but worse than dead, asleep like death. Lord Talia, being the sort of man who thinks he can outwit fate by simply locking the door, ordered every thread of flax ripped from the castle. Every spindle, every spinning wheel, every bit of linen gone, as if fear could keep the devil away. And so the girl grew up in a house of silence. No spinners humming in the courtyards, no click-clack of wheels, no soft linen against her skin, just velvet and silk and the heavy absence of ordinary things. She became beautiful, as girls in these stories do, with hair like unspun gold and skin like milk. But she was lonely, poor thing, raised in a fortress against a future that waited patiently outside the gates. Years passed. The castle grew dusty with disuse, and Lord Talia watched his daughter like a hawk watches a field mouse, waiting for the sky to fall. But fate, as you know, has all the time in the world. One afternoon, when Talia was grown and lovely and bored, she heard a sound she'd never heard before. A humming, a rhythmic whirring, like music made of wood and thread. She followed it through the overgrown gardens, past the gates her father had forbidden her to pass, to a cottage where an old woman sat with her wheel. The spindle danced, the flax spun into gold. "What magic is this?" Talia asked, reaching out. The old woman smiled, showing teeth like old ivory. "Just a trick, my dear. Want to try?" Of course she wanted to try. She took the spindle, feeling the strange vibration of it, the pull of the thread, and that's when it happened. A splinter of flax, thin as a needle, sharp as a lie, slipped beneath her fingernail. She gasped. The room spun. She tried to pull it out, but the darkness came faster than blood. She fell, not like a woman fainting, but like a tree falling. Heavy and final, the old woman screamed. By the time Lord Talia arrived, his daughter was cold. Not dead, the physician said, but sleeping a sleep that looked exactly like death. The prophecy, it seemed, had kept its appointment. Now, Lord Talia was a man of theatrical sorrows. He couldn't bear to bury her, but he couldn't bear to look at her either. So he did something strange. He had her dressed in her finest velvet gown, placed her on a throne in one of his distant country estates, and then he locked the door. He abandoned the palace, abandoned the estate, abandoned his daughter to the dust and the spiders. He told himself she was sleeping. He told himself he was protecting her. But really, he was just leaving her there, beautiful and alone for whoever might find the key. And someone always finds the key, don't they? Years later, how many no one can say, a king was hunting in those woods. His falcon broke away, flying over a forgotten wall, and he followed it. That's how these things happen. Not by design, but by accident. By birds and curiosity. He found the estate, half swallowed by ivy, and thought a place to rest. He thought he was tired. He thought he was alone. He pushed open the door that Lord Talia had left unguarded, and the dust rose up to greet him like a ghost. There was a throne in the main hall, and on the throne a woman. She was perfect. That's the terrible thing. Perfect as a doll, perfect as a painting, perfect as a corpse. Her chest didn't rise, her eyes didn't flutter, but she was warm. How could she be warm? The king approached, his boots crunching on the dusty floor. He touched her hand, he called to her, he shook her. Nothing. But she was beautiful, and she was helpless, and he was a king who was used to taking what he wanted. "If you cannot wake," he whispered, "then you cannot say no." And in that abandoned house, with only the dust as witness, he took her there on the velvet throne. I won't dress this up in romance. There was no true love's kiss, no gentle awakening. There was only a man and a woman who couldn't scream, couldn't fight, couldn't even dream of escape. When he was done, he straightened his clothes like a man after a meal, and he left her there. He didn't carry her to her bed. He didn't cover her with a blanket. He simply walked out, closing the door behind him, and went back to his castle, to his wife, to his life. And Talia stayed on her throne, sleeping the sleep of the betrayed, while inside her new life began to bloom in the dark. Time moved strangely, for the sleeping months passed like water. Talia's body changed, swelled, grew round with the secret the king had planted. She never woke to feel the kicks, never woke to feel the hunger, never woke to feel the terror of it. Her body simply did what bodies do. It kept living while she slept. The dust settled on her eyelids. The spiders wove webs in her unbound hair. And in her womb, two hearts began to beat, twins, a boy and a girl, sun and moon, though she didn't know them yet. They grew like roses growing over a grave, beautiful and inevitable and unaware. When the time came, her body pushed them out into the world without her mind knowing. Two babies, slippery and screaming, landing on the velvet cushions of the throne. They cried, and the sound echoed in the empty hall. No midwife, no mother to hold them, just two infants and their sleeping mother, surrounded by dust and decay. They rooted at her breasts, finding milk by instinct, and she fed them in her sleep, her arms never moving to cradle them. They were feral children, born of violence and silence, suckling at a stone mother's breast. It was the girl child Moon, though she had no name yet, who was hungry. She sucked at her mother's finger the way babies do, tasting, exploring. And there, under the nail where the splinter had buried itself years ago, she found it. That tiny fragment of flax, the seed of the curse. She sucked it out, a little red thread on her tongue, and swallowed it without knowing. And Talia, oh, Talia felt the poison leave her. Her eyes opened. The dust fell from her lashes. She looked down at the children attached to her. These strangers, these miracles, these fruits of a crime she didn't remember. And she screamed, "Who are you?" She cried, but they couldn't answer. They just looked at her with eyes like their father's. Yes, she saw it now, the resemblance, though she didn't know whose face it mirrored. She gathered them up, these warm living bundles, and held them close. "Son," she whispered to the boy because he was golden and loud. "Moon," she whispered to the girl because she was pale and quiet. She didn't know where she was. She didn't know how long. But she knew, somehow, that she had been ruined and blessed in the same breath, and that the world outside was no longer hers. The king returned, of course he did. Men like him always return to the scene of the crime, to see if the ghost is still there. He found the door open, the dust disturbed, and his heart hammered in his chest. He found Talia awake, nursing his children, and he felt something twist in his chest. Not guilt, mind you, but possession. "They are mine," he said. She looked up, and she should have screamed, should have run. But she was lonely, and he was handsome, and she didn't remember the darkness. "Yes," she said, "and I'm yours." But he couldn't stay. He had a wife waiting, a queen. And queens have ways of knowing when their kings are lying. The queen was clever. She was cruel. She was suspicious. She found the hunting trips, the distant estate, the names he whispered in his sleep, sun, moon, Talia. She sent spies. She learned of the beautiful woman and the bastard twins living in the abandoned house. Her heart didn't break. It calcified. She didn't weep. She planned. If he wants them to be meat, she told her most trusted cook, her eyes like flint, then meat they shall be, but not to the wolves, to him. Bring me the children and prepare them for the oven. And bring me the woman to burn. The cook was a man with soft hands and a softer heart, but he was also a man who knew the queen's temper. He went to the estate with soldiers. He took sun from his mother's arms. He took moon from her breast. Talia screamed this time. Oh, how she screamed, but they bound her and dragged her toward the palace. The cook held the twins, feeling their warmth, their beating hearts, and he knew he couldn't do it. But he also knew the queen would check, so he made a plan. He took 2 lambs from the field, fat and white, and he prepared them with herbs and spices, and he hoped the queen wouldn't look too closely at the bones. The cook hid the children in a cupboard, in a cellar, in the dark where the queen wouldn't think to look. He gave them to a nursemaid with instructions to keep them quiet. Then he roasted the lambs until they smelled like heaven and looked like, well, close enough to human meat if you didn't look at the hooves. He arranged them on silver platters with rosemary and apples in their mouths. The queen came to inspect, sniffing the air, checking the kitchen. "Good," she said. "Now bring the father and bring the whore to the courtyard. I have built a pyre that will light up the whole kingdom." They brought Talia to the courtyard in chains. She didn't understand. She thought the king loved her. She thought the children were safe. She saw the pyre, stacked high with wood and tar, and she understood. The queen stood on the balcony wearing her crown, looking down with a smile like a blade. You slept with my husband, the queen called out. You bore his bastards. Now you will burn, and he will eat them, and we will be done with this. Talia screamed for her children, for the king, for anyone. But the king was already at the table, waiting for his meal, unaware that he was about to feast on his own flesh. The cook served the king himself. He placed the silver domes on the table and lifted the lids with trembling hands. The smell was rich, gamey, wrong. The king picked up his knife and fork, hungry from his ride, and cut into the meat. It was tender, it was sweet, it was lamb, but he didn't know that. He thought, oh, the horror of it. He thought he was eating his children. The queen watched him chew, her smile widening. Do you like it, my love? She asked. Do you find it to your taste? He nodded, confused, disturbed, his stomach turning. Yes, he said, very tender. And the queen laughed, thinking she had won. But wait, said the cook, falling to his knees. Your Majesty, there is more. And he clapped his hands. From the side door came the nursemaid holding Sun, and behind her, another with Moon. The children ran to their father, calling his name, alive and whole and beautiful. The king dropped his fork, the color left his face. He looked at the meat on his plate, then at the living children, then at the queen. What is this? He roared. The queen's smile shattered. I ordered you to cook them, she screamed at the cook. I did, my lady, he said, weeping. But I could not, they lived. And that is, lamb, you have fed him. The king moved faster than thought. He ran through the halls, down to the courtyard, where Talia was already tied to the stake, the torches lit, the flames beginning to lick at her velvet gown. Stop, he bellowed. The guards froze. He cut her down with his hunting knife, holding her as she collapsed, weeping against his chest. My children? She gasped. Safe, he said, alive? He carried her away from the pyre, away from the smoke, while behind him, the queen was dragged from her balcony by the guards she had thought were loyal. The fire still burned. Someone had to feed it. They brought the queen to the courtyard she had prepared for murder. She struggled. She cursed. She promised rewards and threatened horrors. But the king's face was stone. You would have burned the innocent, he said. You would have fed me my own blood. You are the only monster here. They tied her to the stake where Talia had stood. They lit the wood she had stacked. She screamed as the flames caught her hair, her dress, her skin. The smell was terrible. Talia watched, holding her children, and she did not look away. Some endings are necessary. Some fires clean what soap cannot touch. So the king married Talia, his sleeping beauty, his raped bride, his second wife. The cook was rewarded with gold and land and the king's eternal gratitude. Sun and Moon grew up in the castle, never knowing how close they came to the oven, never knowing their father was both savior and violator, and Talia, she smiled at feasts, she wore her crown. But sometimes late at night, she would touch the finger where the splinter had been, and she would remember the darkness. Sometimes sleep is a mercy. Sometimes waking is the real curse. They lived happily ever after, if you can call it that. They lived, which is more than most can say in tales like these.